Welcome back to All About Winning Daily Fantasy Sports. My name is Ty Patton. In this video, I will identify the top quarterbacks to target for the contest on this Sunday's Week 10 main slate. Before we dive into Week 10, I want to take a quick look back at Week 9 and see what the numbers tell us. The top 5 projected quarterbacks going into Week 9 were as follows: Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, and Josh Allen. The actual top 5 scoring quarterbacks were as follows: Russell Wilson, who scored 42.22 fantasy points; Matt Stafford, who scored 29.84 fantasy points; Ryan Tannehill, who scored 28.04 fantasy points; Jameis Winston, who scored 24.20 fantasy points; and Ryan Fitzpatrick, who scored 23.72 fantasy points. It's interesting that Wilson and Winston, who were in the top 5 scoring, also came from the same game, which just happened to be the game that had the highest total. That's why I start a lot of my videos of talking about, before I look at any players or salaries or anything, the first thing I do is I look at the lines and totals, and I'm looking for the games with the higher totals, because if they're projecting them to be high scoring, these are going to be the games that had the players necessary to do the scoring. That doesn't mean that I don't consider any of the other games, obviously looking for matchups and value, but this is just a place to start. Now, these top 5 scoring quarterbacks in Week 9, they averaged 40.6 pass attempts. Their team scored an average of 28.8 points. They averaged 347.6 passing yards, and their average fantasy points scored was 29.60 fantasy points. I've developed this chart. I brought it out the first time last week, made a few adjustments to it. I did this to help you follow along with me when I'm talking about numbers and when I'm breaking down the players that I like and why. Before, I used to give out a lot of numbers, and I know you might remember a few things and without having a visual. So hopefully this will help you out some. Feel free to drop any comments or opinions below, something you might like me to add, and I'll see what I can do. I don't have a link that you can follow to it, but if you want to screenshot it, obviously, or pause the video, look at it, use it how you want. Obviously, green is the best, yellow is middle of the road, and red's the worst in comparison for whatever category it is. For instance, here in salary, Lamar Jackson have his salary in red. That just means that he's the most expensive. Obviously, Lamar Jackson's not the worst quarterback on this main slate, but it just depends what the category is and in comparison. And the categories that I have for the quarterback are pass attempts per game, the completion percentage, fantasy points scored per game, defensive points per game. How much did they give up to that position per game? The defense's overall rank, the defense's rank against that position, the line, and the over and under for that game. So these are the quarterbacks that I'm going to be targeting in Week 10. They're already highlighted over here in green, and I have one in yellow. Yellow just means I'm kind of on the fence with this particular player, and I'll talk about him when we get there. To start things off, obviously Lamar Jackson, most expensive quarterback on the main slate, and for a really good reason. He's the highest scoring quarterback on this particular slate, averaging 27.7 fantasy points per game. Large road favorite, playing Cincinnati, who's ranked 25 against the quarterback. Their defense is 27 overall. In Week 6 against Cincinnati, he had 236 passing yards, 152 rushing yards, and a touchdown. The only thing that I feel that could make this a really, really good play is if Cincinnati can score a little bit. And that's kind of concerning this week because they're going to be starting a rookie quarterback. And what really concerns me about that is rookie quarterback makes some rookie mistakes. Baltimore scores a touchdown or two on defense, then Lamar Jackson has to do very little. They lean on the running game, shorten the game, and get out of Cincinnati healthy. Excuse me. And you can see he's got a really low pass attempts per game. Now, he does average 79 yards rushing per game, but how much of that will be needed? So I'm really, and when I use him, I'm really hoping that Cincinnati can do some scoring. Lamar Jackson's one of those quarterbacks that I feel like I don't necessarily have to have a target with him. Most of the times when I'm stacking, obviously, with my quarterback, I want one or two targets and bring it back with a player or two from the other team. I don't really have any interest of stacking this game, and I don't mind running Lamar Jackson out there by himself. He spreads the ball around and gets his rushing yards. He definitely has a really high floor, and his ceiling is could be phenomenal, especially if Cincinnati gives a little resistance. Next is Jameis Winston from Tampa Bay. He's 6,800. He's averaging 38.4 pass attempts per game. He's scoring 21.9 fantasy points per game. Arizona is giving up the most on this slate to the quarterback position at 27.5 fantasy points per game. Their overall defensive rank is number 30. Excuse me. And their defense is number 32 against the quarterback position. This is the highest total on the main slate at 52.5 points. And I feel like this is Arizona's ranked number 14 against the run, so pretty decent against the run, above average. And Tampa Bay's running game is pretty much non-existent, so you can definitely see Winston putting the ball in the air 40 or more times in this game. I feel like Arizona is going to be able to score a little bit. Obviously, Las Vegas does too, because this is the highest total on the board. There's going to be some points, and I believe they're going to come through the air. So I have a lot of interest in Jameis Winston. Next is Drew Brees. He's 6,700. He could be a nice pivot off a higher owned Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan's going to be higher owned than Brees because of positive game script, and obviously the price is $600 less. They are the largest favorite on the main slate. I always like quarterbacks that are the large favorites. 12.5 point home favorite, second highest total on the board. Atlanta's number 29 versus the quarterback. Their defense is 29th overall. They're giving up 24.9 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. Drew Brees has an astounding, it's only a couple game sample, but it's 75.8% completion percentage, which is just unheard of. And I feel like he has a lot of weapons. So his first game back, he had, I believe it was 370 yards. This sets up really nice for Brees. I believe Atlanta will be able to put some points on New Orleans. And but interesting enough, a lot of his better games had come when he played. His last 5 games versus Atlanta at home, they averaged, excuse me, a combined 51.7 points. But he had 300 yards passing 7 out of the last 10 games versus Atlanta. So I definitely have some shares of Drew Brees teamed up with some of his targets this week. Next is Kyler Murray. Murray's 6,500, averaging 35 pass attempts per game. Is in the game that has the highest total on the board at 52.5 points. Tampa Bay is number 31 versus the quarterback, and their defense is number 32 overall. He's scoring the third highest or second highest. No, their defense is giving up the second highest to the quarterback at 25.8 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. I believe that this will be a high scoring game. They're going to get it done if they're going to get it done, it's going to be through the air because Tampa Bay's defense is very stingy. They're ranked number 3 against the run. I worry about him making some mistakes, but some mistakes and combination of Tampa Bay putting points on the score could mean a lot of pass attempts. They run a really fast-paced offense, run a lot of plays per game, which creates more plays for the other team, which is why they're usually in the games that have the higher totals. But I have a lot of interest in him. The only thing about Murray is if I'm at 6,500, I probably want to try to get up, spend the extra 200 and get up to Breeze, or 300 and get up to Winston. But he's definitely interesting with his individual matchup. Next is Matt Ryan. He's 6,100. New Orleans is really stingy versus the run. They're ranked number 3. They're ranked number 3. Tampa Bay is ranked number 2. I'm sorry. They have the second highest. They're in the second highest total on the board, 51 at New Orleans. Matt Ryan has the second highest completion percentage on the slate, or the third highest. I'm sorry, 70.9% completion percentage. Scoring 24.2 fantasy points per game. It's averaging 40.7 pass attempts per game, which that is definitely the highest on the main slate. In his last 2 games against New Orleans, he's averaged 376 yards, 3.5 touchdowns, and that's in the last 2 games that he's played against New Orleans. So I'll definitely have my shares of him. He's going to have a really high ownership because of that salary, and it's what they call positive game script, with the belief that New Orleans is going to put it on him, and he's going to have no choice but to have to throw the ball all over the place, and which probably will happen. And sets up really nice to be a shootout. I believe they'll push New Orleans just enough. But as I mentioned when I was talking about Breeze could actually be the contrarian play off of Matt Ryan instead of the other way around, just due to he's going to have a really high ownership. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. And when we do lineup building, I'll be checking that before I build some lineups tomorrow as well. Last and not least is Mitchell Trubisky. He's 5,100. I'm going back to the well again this week. Detroit's number 26 DVP against the quarterback position. He's had some really good games against Detroit. In last year's game, he had 300.8, or Detroit allows 300.8 passing yards a game. And in his last game against them, he had 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. No, he had 355 yards, 3 touchdowns, 18 rushing yards, and 1 touchdown for 39 fantasy points. And that's the last time he played against Detroit in Chicago. I know he hasn't been having a really good year. I just have this sneaky feeling that they're going home, and at 5,100, it doesn't take much for him to pay off value. So I have a little bit of interest. I haven't decided. That's why I got him in yellow. But I'm thinking I will have some shares of Trubisky. And he'll probably be really low owned due to recency bias. And so I have a lot of interest in the quarterback of $5,100. So summing it up, these are the quarterbacks that I will have in my player pool for Week 10. Lamar Jackson, Jameis Winston, Drew Brees, Kyler Murray, Matt Ryan, and Mitchell Trubisky. I'm not sure. When we do some lineup building tomorrow, I'll give you a straight yay or nay. I just want to think about a little bit more. I don't really have much to go on other than Detroit's number 26 versus the quarterback position. They're only giving up 22.9 fantasy points to the quarterback. They're small, but Chicago's a small home favorite. And another thing, Detroit's really bad against the running game, against running backs. So maybe Trubisky doesn't have to do anything, and they'll go that route. But I just I looked at his pass against Detroit, and I don't always use that. I just found that it's interesting, and they've had some difficulties the last few weeks. I think this sets up for a very difficult game for Detroit. So I want to thank you guys for joining me. Please share this video, like, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you get notified when my next video posts. I'll be posting the running back video right after this one. And then I'll do wide receiver and then follow that up with tight end, defensive, special teams. You can also follow me on Twitter at winningabout. I post my videos there as well. Have some followers there and post some other things, things that I'm picking up, news sources and weather and stuff like that. I just got that going this past couple weeks. So join me there. I want to thank you guys again. Appreciate you joining me. The My subscriber numbers have been going up, and that I really appreciate that. And I'll be back real soon with the running back video. This is all about winning daily fantasy sports. My name is Ty Patton, and I'll see you real soon.